A week before college, my parents said, "We gave your tuition to your brother's business. Be proud you're supporting the family." I didn't argue, I just left. A year later, his business collapsed and I was making six figures without a degree. Now they won't stop calling. Hey Reddit, my parents stole my college fund to bankroll my brother's startup, then told me to be grateful for the opportunity to support the family. So I disappeared, built my own business, and watched his empire burn while I quietly made more money than any of them ever dreamed of. Here's how it all went down. The day my life completely changed started with scrambled eggs and the fakest smile I'd ever seen on my mother's face. I'm Blake, 18 male at the time, 21 now, and I still remember every detail of that morning. The way sunlight hit the kitchen counter at exactly 8:47 a.m. How mom's voice was just a little too cheerful, like a hostess greeting guests she didn't actually want in her house. How dad kept tapping his wedding ring against his coffee mug like a metronome, clearly rehearsing a speech in his head. The kitchen smelled like burned toast because mom had been distracted while making breakfast. There was this tension in the air that I couldn't quite place, the kind you feel before a storm hits. When the pressure changes and the birds go quiet, I should have recognized it for what it was. But I was 18 and stupid, still believing in things like fairness and family loyalty. I was wearing my university hoodie that morning, had just gotten it in the mail 2 days earlier. Navy blue with the school crest embroidered on the chest. $45 I couldn't really afford, but I'd bought it anyway because I was proud. Because after 4 years of killing myself with advanced placement classes and extracurriculars nobody cared about, I'd actually done it. Got accepted to a real university with a decent program. 1 week before I was supposed to move into my college dorm, they sat me down for what they called an important family conversation. I'd spent the entire previous year obsessively planning every single detail of my college transition. We're talking color-coded spreadsheets with tabs for course registration, housing logistics, meal plans, textbook costs, and a detailed budget breakdown of every expense for the first semester I'd registered for orientation. Back in April, the first day registration opened. Bought secondhand textbooks from outgoing seniors. Saved almost $300 doing that worked nights at Morrison's grocery store stocking shelves for minimum wage. Picking up every extra shift I could get. Saved $1,700 over 10 months just for the little things dorm decorations. A decent laptop from a pawn shop that I'd personally stress tested to make sure it could handle my computer science coursework. Even one of those tiny dorm fridges, because I'd read multiple forums where college kids complained about campus dining getting old by October. I had post-it notes all over my bedroom wall with lists. What to pack, what to buy when I got there, which professors had the best ratings, which clubs I wanted to join. My roommate and I had already connected on the university Facebook group and planned out how we'd split the space. I'd even memorized the bus routes from campus to downtown in case I needed to pick up shifts at a grocery store there. For most of high school, I'd been the invisible, responsible one, the kid who stayed home on Friday nights doing homework while everyone else was at parties. The one who joined National Honor Society and student government, not because I cared about leadership positions, but because I thought it would look good on applications. The one who took every AP class available even though they were crushing my soul, because everyone said that's what you had to do to get into a good school. For most of high school, I'd been the quiet, responsible one. Straight A's, no parties, stayed out of trouble. Not because I was scared of consequences, but because I thought it would mean something. I thought if I worked hard and didn't make waves, someone would notice. Maybe not with big dramatic praise, but with little things like keeping their promises. Like paying for the tuition they'd been saving for since I was 12. So when mom said, "Blake, sweetie, your dad and I need to talk to you about something important," I just smiled and took another bite of eggs. Had no reason to be suspicious. No reason to brace for the absolute gut punch that was coming. Dad leaned forward with that familiar calm face he always wore when he was about to lecture me about life being unfair. Then he said it. "We gave your tuition money to your brother. His business needs it more right now." Just like that. One sentence. No build-up, no apology, just a cold, clinical statement like he was announcing the weather. I didn't respond at first. Just blinked. Stared at the salt shaker on the table because I couldn't look either of them in the eye. I thought maybe they were joking. Some twisted lesson about appreciating what you have or something. But when I looked up, mom had this strange expression. Not guilty, not embarrassed. Something closer to proud. "You should be happy," she said. "You're supporting the family in a big way. This is what being part of something bigger than yourself looks like." That's when it hit me. They weren't telling me this because they felt bad. They were telling me because they thought I should be proud. Because in their eyes, I wasn't the one with dreams or goals anymore. I was just convenient. Let me back up a bit so you understand the full picture of dysfunction here. My older brother Kyle is 6 years older than me. Growing up, he was the undisputed golden child. Every mistake he made got reframed as a learning experience, or a creative detour, or some other garbage that meant he never faced consequences. Every time I brought home an A, he got a pizza party for remembering to take out the trash once without being asked 4 times first. The double standards were insane. When I was 13 and forgot to mow the lawn because I had a huge exam to study for, I got grounded for 2 weeks and had my computer privileges revoked. When Kyle was 19 and crashed Dad's car because he was texting while driving, Dad's response was to buy him a newer, safer car because the old one clearly wasn't handling right. When Kyle dropped out of college after 1 semester, claiming the traditional education system was stifling his entrepreneurial spirit, my parents acted like he'd just been accepted into an exclusive accelerator program at Stanford. Never mind that he'd failed 3 classes and basically stopped showing up after Thanksgiving break. The narrative became that Kyle was too innovative for conventional education, too forward-thinking to waste time in lectures when he could be building the future. They poured money into his startup like it was some kind of unlimited trust fund. First, it was $5,000 for a logo design and website, then $10,000 for essential tech equipment, which turned out to be 2 Mac Pros and a ridiculous standing desk that cost more than my entire bedroom furniture. Then $20,000 for office space rental, a trendy co-working loft in the hip part of downtown, where Kyle could network with other 20-something founders drinking cold brew and talking about disruption. Every few months, Kyle would come back with his hand out and a new pitch about why this next investment was the one that would finally unlock everything. They always said yes. Always. Even when Mom's car was on its last legs and she desperately needed a replacement, they delayed that purchase because Kyle needed another $5,000 for a marketing campaign that generated 0 actual customers. The company never really took off, but Kyle always had a new pivot, a new idea that just needed a bit more runway. He wasn't lazy, I'll give him that, but he was reckless. Borrowed like nothing had to be paid back, promised things he couldn't deliver, and somehow always managed to convince our parents he was on the verge of something big. The company was called Streamflow, some kind of project management tool that was supposedly going to revolutionize how remote teams collaborate. Except there were already 50 tools that did the same thing, most of them better. But Kyle had convinced himself and our parents that he was building the next big thing. So when I got accepted into a solid university, not Ivy League but competitive, and my parents assured me they had the first year covered, I believed them. Why wouldn't I? I'd followed every rule, played it safe, stayed in my lane, and in return, I was supposed to get my shot. Instead, I got a morning lecture about making sacrifices, served with eggs and toast. I asked one question, just one. So what am I supposed to do now? Dad looked at me like I was being unreasonable. Take a gap year. Get a job. Plenty of kids your age need time to figure things out. I already figured it out, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. I'm supposed to move in next week. We know, Mom said gently, as if that made it any better, and we're really sorry about the timing. But you're smart, Blake. You'll find another way. The worst part wasn't the decision itself. It was how they acted like this was my opportunity to grow. Like being robbed of my future was some kind of character-building exercise. Like I should thank them for the privilege of watching my brother burn through my college fund. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't even raise my voice. I just nodded, excused myself from the table, walked upstairs to my room, and closed the door. That was the moment everything changed. Something inside me snapped. Not in some dramatic movie way where I smashed a mirror or punched a wall. It was quieter than that. More final. Like a switch flipping off. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in bed staring at the ceiling, going over every conversation I'd ever had with my parents that suddenly felt fake. All the times they told me they were proud. All the times they said, "We've got your back." It was like realizing your safety net was made of paper, and you'd been performing tricks 50 feet in the air the whole time. Around 3 a.m., I got up and started actually looking at my options. Not fantasy options where everything works out, but real-world, 18-year-old with no safety net options student loans. I'd need a co-signer, and guess who wasn't going to sign anything for me? Scholarships? Most deadlines had passed months ago, and the few that hadn't wouldn't cover enough working full-time and taking night classes? Maybe, but that would mean 5 or 6 years to get a degree instead of 4, assuming I didn't burn out first. Every option sucked. Every single one. But sitting there at 3 a.m., doing the math on how completely I'd been screwed, I realized something important. I didn't actually need their permission to leave. I was legally an adult. I had some money saved. I wasn't chained to this house, or their expectations, or their warped sense of family loyalty. The next morning, I started packing. Not for college. For something else entirely. I didn't make a big announcement or have a dramatic confrontation. Just quietly went through my room, sorting things into two categories: essential and disposable. Clothes, laptop, important documents. That all went into my two suitcases: childhood stuff, trophies from middle school, random junk I'd been holding on to for sentimental reasons. That stayed. I wasn't sentimental anymore. It took me about 3 hours to pack up 18 years of my life. 3 hours. That's all it was worth, apparently. Found my birth certificate in a filing cabinet in Dad's office, along with my social security card. Took both without asking. Not stealing. They were mine. But I knew if I asked, they'd find some reason I shouldn't take them yet. Some way to maintain a little bit of control. I left the house with two suitcases, the $1,000 I'd saved from Morrison's grocery store, and one rule permanently burned into my mind. Never rely on anyone who treats you like a backup plan. Mom caught me loading my stuff into my beater Honda Civic around noon. She came out the front door with this confused expression, holding a dish towel she'd been using in the kitchen. "Blake, honey, where are you going?" she asked, like I was just running an errand. "Moving out." "Moving out? What do you mean? You're supposed to leave for school next week." "Not going to school anymore, remember? You gave away my tuition." Her face did this complicated thing where she tried to look sympathetic and annoyed at the same time. "Well, you can't just leave. Where will you go? What about your job?" "I'll figure it out." "Blake, don't be dramatic. Come inside and we'll talk about this like adults." That line almost made me laugh. Talk about it like adults. Like the adults who made a major financial decision about my future without even consulting me first. Like the adults who'd been lying to me about saving for college while Kyle burned through their money on a failing company. "Nothing to talk about," I said, slamming my trunk shut. Dad appeared then, walking down from the driveway where he'd apparently been watching. "Son, your mother's right. This is an overreaction." "Is it?" I looked at him directly. "You took $18,000 that was supposed to be mine and gave it to Kyle without asking, without even warning me until a week before I was supposed to start school. That's not an overreaction trigger. That's a natural consequence. We're still your parents," Dad said, voice getting that edge it always got when someone questioned his authority. "You don't get to just walk away from family. Watch me." I got in my car before either of them could respond. Started the engine, backed out of the driveway while Mom stood there wringing that dish towel, and Dad's face went red with the kind of anger he only showed when he couldn't control something. Drove away and didn't look back. Not once. I moved in with Tyler, a guy I used to work with at Morrison's who had a spare room in his apartment across town. It wasn't glamorous. No air conditioning, even though we were heading into September. Had to sleep on a futon that creaked if I breathed too hard. And the bathroom had this persistent mildew smell that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. But it was mine. More importantly, it wasn't theirs. Tyler was cool about the whole situation. Didn't ask too many questions when I showed up with two suitcases and a haunted look. Just showed me the room, handed me a spare key, and said rent was $300 a month plus splitting utilities. Cash only because he was subletting and his landlord didn't know he had a roommate. Not exactly legal, but I wasn't in a position to be picky about housing arrangements. The room was maybe 10 by 10 feet, barely big enough for the futon, and a small desk Tyler had pulled from somewhere one window that looked out onto the parking lot. Walls that were beige except for spots where previous tenants had tried to paint them other colors and given up halfway through. But you know what? After 18 years of sleeping in a house where every room reminded me how little I mattered, that beige room with its terrible futon felt like freedom. I didn't cut them off completely at first. They texted a few times that first week, checking in like nothing had happened. "Mom, how's the job hunt going?" "Mom, let us know if you need anything." "Dad, your brother's really excited about this new funding round he's working on. Investor presentation went well. That last one made me laugh bitterly." Kyle was excited. Of course he was. He'd just gotten an $18,000 cash injection courtesy of my future, and apparently investors were now interested because he finally had enough runway to look semi-legitimate. I stopped responding after day 3. Not out of spite initially, but because I had actual work to do. Real survival-level work. The kind that didn't involve begging my parents for validation or watching Kyle fail upward while everyone clapped. Here's what most people don't understand about being broke at 18 with zero safety net and no backup plan. It clarifies things. Real fast. You stop caring about comfort or appearances or what your family thinks. You just focus on not becoming homeless. Then, if you're smart and angry enough, You focus on more than just survival. I picked up 2 jobs within the first week. Kept my Morrison's grocery store gig, 30 hours a week stocking shelves from 6 p.m. to midnight, which paid $8.50 an hour and came with exactly 0 benefits. Then added weekend shifts at a warehouse loading trucks for this distribution company that paid cash under the table, $15 an hour if you showed up on time, and didn't complain about the work being brutal. The warehouse job wasn't exactly legal, but nobody asked questions, and I needed money immediately. The work was exactly what you'd expect, lifting boxes from pallets, loading them onto trucks according to whatever cryptic system the supervisor had invented, trying not to get crushed when someone backed up a forklift without checking their mirrors. We worked in this massive building with no climate control, so in September it was still 90 degrees inside, and everyone was soaked in sweat within 15 minutes. Between both jobs, I was pulling 60-hour weeks and sleeping maybe 5 hours a night on that terrible futon. I'd finish my grocery store shift at midnight, get home around 12:30 a.m., set my alarm for 5:45 a.m., then wake up to be at the warehouse by 6:30 for weekend shifts. Sunday nights, I'd go straight from the warehouse to my grocery store shift without going home, just changing clothes in my car and using baby wipes to make myself semi-presentable. My body felt like it was falling apart. My back hurt constantly from lifting boxes that were way heavier than the shipping labels indicated. My hands were always covered in cuts and scrapes from cardboard edges and pallets with splinters. I'd come home at midnight too tired to even microwave food, just collapse on that creaky futon fully clothed and pass out. But here's the thing. I wasn't miserable. I was angry. And anger, when you channel it right and don't let it eat you alive, is pure rocket fuel. During those rare moments when I wasn't working, like my 15-minute lunch breaks at the warehouse, or the dead hour at Morrison's between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. when nobody shopped, I was on my phone not scrolling social media or playing games or any of the things normal 18-year-olds did. I was learning. Started with YouTube tutorials about digital marketing because some guy at the warehouse mentioned his girlfriend made decent money doing freelance social media management. Watched videos about SEO, content creation, copywriting, all these terms I'd barely heard of. Moved to Reddit threads about freelancing, where people shared their income breakdowns and strategies. Found articles about people who'd built entire businesses from nothing, with just a laptop and internet connection. That's when I discovered content creation as an actual business model. Not the influencer stuff where you post selfies and hope brands notice you. I'm talking about businesses that needed writers, designers, video editors. Companies paying real money for people who could make their websites look professional instead of like they'd been designed in 2003 by the owner's nephew. I started with Fiverr. Made a profile offering to write product descriptions for $5 a pop. My first gig came 3 days later. Some dropshipping store needed descriptions for 50 items, paid me $250 total. Took me 12 hours to finish, but I did it. The client left a 5-star review, then another gig came, then another. Within 2 weeks, I was making more on Fiverr than at the grocery store. I quit the grocery store, kept the warehouse job for stable income, but shifted my focus to building a real freelance business. Started charging more, took on bigger projects, learned faster than I ever did in any classroom. 3 months in, I'd saved $5,000, more money than I'd ever had in my life, and nobody could take it from me. Around this time, I met Hannah through a freelance writing forum on Reddit. Someone had posted asking for recommendations for decent copywriters who wouldn't charge agency prices, and another user tagged me based on some comments I'd made in previous threads. Hannah reached out via DM asking if I'd want to collaborate on a project. She was 22, had dropped out of art school after 2 years when she realized she was spending $50,000 to learn things she could teach herself from YouTube and online courses. Now she was doing graphic design work for startups, charging reasonable rates, and building a solid portfolio. Her style was clean, modern, exactly what tech companies wanted, but usually couldn't afford from big agencies. We started collaborating on projects. I'd handle the copy, website content, product descriptions, email sequences, and she'd handle the visuals, logo designs, website mockups, social media graphics. Clients loved the package deal. They could hire both of us for less than what a traditional agency would charge just for the design work, and they get everything done faster because we communicated efficiently. Our first joint project was for a small e-commerce company selling outdoor gear. They needed a complete website redesign, new copy, new layout, new graphics. We quoted them $3,500 and delivered everything in 2 weeks. They were thrilled, left us both 5-star reviews, and referred us to 2 other companies in their network. That's when things started clicking. We weren't just freelancers scrambling for gigs anymore. We were becoming a team that delivered consistent quality one night around November. About 3 months after I'd moved out, Hannah and I met up at this cheap diner near Tyler's apartment to work on a proposal for a potential client. We were both exhausted. She'd been pulling 16-hour days trying to meet deadlines, and I was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep between my warehouse shift and Morrison's. We ordered coffee and fries because that's all we could afford, spread out our laptops on the sticky table, and started mapping out the project scope. But about an hour in, Hannah closed her laptop and looked at me with this intense expression. "We should stop freelancing for other people and start our own thing," she said. "Like what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "A content agency. We find the clients, we set the rates, we build the systems. Stop being hired hands for $50 an hour and start being the ones doing the hiring. We already work well together. We have testimonials. We know the pain points and what clients actually want. Why keep making other people money when we could be making it ourselves?" It sounded completely insane. We were both broke 20-somethings with no business experience, no capital, no connections. Hannah had debt from her truncated art school experience. I was still working 2 manual labor jobs and sleeping on a futon in a subletted room. Neither of us had any business starting a company. But the more we talked about it over those progressively colder fries, the more it made sense. We'd both been doing this for months. We knew the work. We knew the market rates. We knew what separated good agencies from bad ones: communication, reliability, and actually delivering what you promise, instead of overpromising and underdelivering. "What would we even call it?" I asked. "I don't know. Something that sounds legit, like we've been doing this for years instead of months." We brainstormed names for about 20 minutes. Most of them were terrible. Digital Dynamics, Creative Solutions, Pixel Perfect, all the generic startup names that every other agency was already using. Then Hannah said, "What about Content Forge? Like, we forge content, build it from scratch, make it strong." I repeated it a few times. Content Forge? Yeah, that actually worked. Sounded professional but not pretentious. Memorable without being gimmicky. "Okay," I said. "So we're really doing this? Unless you want to keep loading trucks until your back gives out at 30. 2 weeks later, we registered Content Forge as an LLC. Cost us $50 total to file online, which we split. Built a basic website on a free template that Hannah customized with her design skills. Wrote case studies based on our best freelance projects. Technically, those were for individual clients, but we reframed them as Content Forge success stories because nobody would check our pitch was brutally simple. "Your website looks like it was made by someone's cousin in 2008. We can fix that." We started cold emailing local businesses that had terrible online presences. Restaurants with websites that looked like MySpace pages. Real estate agencies still using stock photos from 2005. HVAC companies whose contact us forms didn't even work. The response rate was garbage at first. Maybe one reply for every 100 emails. Most people ignored us. Some told us to get lost. One guy wrote back a 3-paragraph rant about millennials, thinking they could do marketing just because they had Instagram accounts. But that one reply per 100 would lead to a consultation call. And roughly half those consultations led to paid projects. Our first official Content Forge client was a regional plumbing company that needed monthly blog posts about plumbing maintenance, social media content, and email newsletters to send to their customer base. They agreed to pay us $1,500 a month for all 3 services. $1,500 a month didn't sound like much, but it was revolutionary for 2 reasons. First, it was recurring revenue. Same money coming in every month without us having to constantly hunt for new clients. Second, it was enough to prove the model worked. If we could land 1 retainer client, we could land 5. If we could land 5, we could land 20. Hannah quit her day job. I quit the warehouse. We went all in. That's when things started moving fast. We hired our first contractor, a video editor Hannah knew from art school, then a second writer, then a project manager to keep everything organized. Content Forge went from a side hustle to an actual company with employees and processes and profit margins. My parents had no idea. Neither did Kyle. I'd gone completely dark on social media. No posts, no updates, no breadcrumb trail showing what I was building. As far as they knew, I was probably still stocking shelves somewhere, bitter about the college thing, which is exactly what I wanted them to think. Meanwhile, Kyle's business was imploding in slow motion. I knew this because Tyler, my roommate, was friends with someone who worked at the startup incubator where Kyle had an office. The rumors were brutal. Kyle had burned through my tuition money in 4 months. Spent it on team building retreats, fancy office furniture, and a marketing campaign that generated exactly 0 paying customers. StreamFlow had maybe 10 active users, all of them friends and family testing it out of pity. The product was buggy, the interface was confusing, and Kyle kept pivoting every few weeks to chase whatever trend he'd read about in TechCrunch that morning. 6 months after taking my money, he went back to our parents asking for more. They gave it to him. I know because Mom accidentally texted me instead of Kyle during one of her group message fails. Transferring the $8,000 now. Tell your father it's from the home equity line. They'd taken out a second mortgage to fund his nonsense. My college fund wasn't enough. Now they were gambling their house. I didn't respond to the text. Just screenshot it and filed it away. Evidence for later. By the time I turned 20, ContentForge was generating $30,000 a month in revenue. We'd moved into a real office. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse space with decent Wi-Fi and enough room for our growing team. Hannah and I split equity 50-50 and took modest salaries. Reinvesting everything else into growth, I bought a used car. Nothing flashy, a reliable Honda that got me from point A to point B. Got my own apartment, this time with actual furniture instead of a futon. Started saving money in a real investment account instead of just letting it sit in checking. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every decision, every success, every failure, all mine. No one could take credit for it. No one could claim they'd helped me get there. I'd built this from nothing, in spite of them. Then came the wedding invitation. My cousin Ashley was getting married. Big fancy affair at some vineyard 2 hours away. The invitation arrived at my old address, my parents' house, and Mom forwarded it to me with a note. Would be nice if you came. Family misses you. Family misses you. Right. The family that stole my future and told me to be grateful. But I decided to go. Not because I missed them. Not because I wanted to reconcile. But because I was ready for them to see exactly what they'd missed. I didn't tell them I was coming. Just RSVP'd directly to Ashley and showed up the day of the wedding looking like someone who had their life together. Good suit, confident walk, the kind of presence that makes people look twice. The venue was one of those upscale barn conversions that charged 5 figures for the privilege of getting married in a building that used to house cows. White string lights everywhere, exposed wooden beams, mason jar centerpieces. The whole Pinterest aesthetic that was trendy a few years ago and somehow still persisting. The parking lot was packed when I arrived. I'd driven up solo in my reliable Honda Civic, still the same car I'd had at 18, but now paid off and maintained properly. Parked between a BMW and a Mercedes, which felt weirdly appropriate given the circumstances. I walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit I'd bought off the rack and had tailored to actually fit nothing fancy, but it looked professional. Combined with a decent haircut, and the confidence that comes from knowing your bank account has 6 figures instead of 3, I looked like someone who had their life together. The ceremony space was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in years. Most of them probably assumed I'd dropped out, moved back home eventually, maybe working retail somewhere, and living paycheck to paycheck, the black sheep who couldn't cut it. The kid who'd had a full ride to college. The story had gotten distorted over time, but couldn't handle the pressure. I scanned the room methodically until I found them. Mom and Dad at a table near the bar, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Dad's hair had gone almost completely gray. Mom had this tightness around her eyes that came from stress or lack of sleep or both. They looked like people who'd made a series of expensive mistakes and were still paying for them. Kyle was there too, standing near their table and nursing a glass of something while staring at his phone. He'd lost weight in a bad way, the kind that comes from stress and irregular eating, not from working out. His suit looked slightly too big, like he'd bought it when he had more money and hadn't replaced it since losing some. Our eyes met across the room. He blinked hard, like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. I gave him a single nod. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement. Mom noticed me about 30 seconds later. Her face went through this fascinating progression. Confusion. Who is that? Recognition. Wait, is that Blake? Automatic smile. Must maintain social appearances. Then something close to panic. Oh no, he's actually here. She stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. Started walking toward me with this forced brightness that didn't reach her eyes. Blake, she said, slightly breathless. Hi, I didn't know you were coming. We didn't see your name on the RSVP list. Wasn't sure I'd make it, I said smoothly. But one of the event sponsors invited me personally. Thought it'd be good networking opportunity. Her smile faltered. Event sponsors? Yeah. ContentForge is handling some of the promotional work for the venue's expansion into the event marketing space. They're trying to book more weddings and corporate events, so we're developing their content strategy. I said it casually, like it was no big deal. Like I hadn't spent 2 years building a company from nothing, while they were probably telling relatives I'd gone off the grid, or was finding himself. The look on her face was everything I'd needed to see. Not quite understanding, but knowing something had shifted. I wasn't the broke kid who'd left with 2 suitcases anymore. Dad joined her a moment later. His smile was tighter, more controlled. Years of practicing professional courtesy in business settings, I guess? Son, he said, extending his hand like we were business associates instead of family. It's good to see you. I shook his hand briefly. Firm grip, eye contact, all the corporate power play stuff he probably thought mattered. Likewise, I replied. He tried to ask more. Where was I living? What had I been up to? The generic catch-up questions you ask when you haven't seen someone in years. But before he could get too far, the event planner approached with a clipboard. Mr. Morrison? She said, looking at me. That's me. Just wanted to confirm your table placement. You're at table 12 with the other vendor representatives and sponsors. We really appreciate Content Forge's partnership on this project. She said it loud enough that my parents definitely heard every word. Dad's face did something complicated. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. The wedding reception unfolded like a stage play, and I was done playing the background character. My parents sat stiffly at their table, barely touching their food. Kyle hovered nearby, clearly rattled, glancing toward me every few minutes like I was a ghost he couldn't quite banish. A few cousins made small talk with me. Polite, curious, awkward. One of them, Brandon, leaned in with a smirk and said, "Didn't you skip college or something? What are you up to now?" I didn't say much, just gestured toward the Content Forge display at the sponsor table, a clean banner with our company name, a QR code, and a brief description. Digital content agency specializing in scalable brand storytelling. Brandon scanned the code out of curiosity. It led to our website, which prominently featured a case study titled From Zero to 500,000 ARR, How Losing Everything at 18 Forced Me to Build Something Real. The case study was intentionally vague. No names, no direct accusations. Just a clean, data-driven narrative about a young person who lost their college opportunity due to family investment priorities, turned to freelancing out of necessity, and built a successful agency through sheer determination. But anyone with half a brain could read between the lines. And judging by the look on Kyle's face when he scanned the code, yes, I saw him do it. He definitely could read between the lines. The fallout started 2 days later. Text from Dad. We need to talk. Face to face. I didn't reply. Text from Mom. Your post. People are asking questions. Please take it down. That made me laugh. Take it down. After they'd framed me as the selfless little brother who nobly stepped aside for the future entrepreneur of the family. No. This was the reckoning. And it wasn't even personal anymore. It was structural, clean, unavoidable. Because the moment that case study went viral, and it did, shared across LinkedIn, Reddit, and several business forums, people started connecting dots. Hannah told me Kyle's former contractor, the one he'd ghosted after promising stock equity, shared the link on Twitter with the caption, "Oh, so this is why he never paid me." A day later, the local startup incubator that had been considering Kyle for a second round of funding posted a quiet update on their website, pausing external investments pending internal review. Translation: Kyle wasn't just off the list, he was toxic. Meanwhile, several of Kyle's early investors, mostly local business owners my dad played cards with, were not happy. The case study didn't name them, but it traced the path of money through phrases like family-backed startups with no KPIs, and early investors promised high returns with zero oversight. Anyone involved knew exactly who that was about. One of them, Dr. Phillips, apparently cornered my dad at a neighborhood barbecue and asked point blank, "Did you give Blake's tuition to Kyle's startup?" Dad didn't answer, but silence in those circles speaks volumes. I started hearing from people, old teachers, high school classmates, even one of Kyle's exes. They all reached out with some variation of, "I read your article, I had no idea." Because that was the power of truth. Not shouted, not dramatized, just documented, calm, measured, unapologetic. Kyle tried to respond. Sort of. He published a blog post titled, "Entrepreneurship is Messy. Lessons from a Startup That Didn't Go as Planned." It was full of vague apologies and corporate jargon phrases like pushing boundaries and building under pressure and learning from challenges. No specifics, no accountability, just word salad. No one bought it. The comments section was brutal. This is what happens when you play with other people's money. Your brother had every right to speak up. You didn't fail because you took risks. You failed because you took people for granted. My parents didn't respond publicly. That wasn't their style, but they felt it. The calls stopped. The texts dried up. Mom unfriended half the extended family on Facebook. Dad shut down his LinkedIn. At first, I thought it was shame, but it wasn't. It was control slipping through their fingers. Quietly, relentlessly. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.